Welcome back, or greetings if you're just tuning in. Just a few words from me. My name is Nathan Lane. I'm the head of our Digital Customer Engagement Center here in Dublin, California. And we're very excited to be continuing day 2 of our multi-half-day workshop. Many of you, or some of you, have asked, like, who are we and what are we? And I wanted to just expand on that real quickly. We are a diverse group of individuals with broad backgrounds or multidisciplinary backgrounds, and collectively more than 100 years of microscopy experience. And our goal here is to be able to leverage digital tools and platforms to deliver content and information and accessibility to cutting-edge tools, virtual accessibility to cutting-edge tools, regardless of where you are, a mountaintop, a valley, or the most remote corner of the country, whether you're a rural state or an urban state or an island. So we hope to make all of this equally accessible across the country, into North America and beyond. So I hope this helps. Just as a reminder, feel free to send any questions to that address in the corner. We've already received and replied to several questions. We're eager and standing by to address any further questions that come up over the course of the day. So I'm going to turn us over to our first speaker, and thank you again for tuning in and wishing you a great day full of education.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining. If you are just tuning in, I'm Rebecca Duffy, and I'm about to talk to you guys a little bit about our Airyscan on our confocal systems, and more specifically, I want to talk about how we can use it to virtually improve the numerical aperture. So here's what we're going to be talking about today. For those of you who maybe aren't familiar with the Airyscan detector, I will go into more of the technical aspects at the end of showing the workflow. But for those of you who are familiar, right, it's often described as a super resolution detector, which it absolutely is. You can see this beautiful image of some neurons that were plated on the right, and I believe GCamp might be stained in magenta, I've forgotten, but these were lovely samples given to us by UCSF researchers. And you know, we can use the Airyscan as a super resolution detector, but something that's really nice about the fact that it is this spatial array detector is that you can actually, instead of just doing super resolution at 63x, if you want to improve your resolution and scan on a dry objective at 20x, you can do that, and it acts as what I like to call a virtual numerical aperture improver. So that's the workflow that I want to talk through today. And again, after I show you a little bit in the software, we will basically jump over into the actual technical aspects behind how the spatial array detector works. So we're going to be looking at these neurons today, and I'll quickly, right, so I have these plated out, and we're going to do a couple of different things. We're going to look at these in confocal and 20x, and then I'm going to compare that confocal image at 20x to, let me move my head. We're going to compare that confocal 20x to our super resolution mode on that same 20x dry objective, and the super resolution mode with our what we call multiplexing, scanning 8 lines at a time. And I want to show you all of these images compared to a confocal 63x, so that, you know, seeing is believing here. And I really want to show you guys how much improved resolution you can get even if you are imaging on a 20x dry objective using the Airyscan detector. And of course, you can even get close to that going faster, scanning 8 lines at a time. So that's really the goal here. We're looking at these neuron samples. So I'm going to take a Z-stack. This is first in confocal mode, and which, you know, still a beautiful image even though we're on a 20x dry objective, but we can improve this even further using our Airyscan Super Res detector. So what I'm going to do in the software is I'm going to switch out of my I use a confocal track here. I'm going to select the super resolution track to capture my next image. But here, of course, we're scrolling through our Z-stack before we do that, making sure that we've captured that whole stack of neurons. And I am going to save these as different names so that we can actually compare side by side later. If you aren't familiar with our multi-splitter view, it's super helpful for actually figuring out which workflows are best for your samples. You can compare different settings side by side, so I'm going to do that at the end. All right, so I've switched over to my super resolution track. One quick thing that we do whenever we're using the Airyscan detector, because it is this 32-element spatial array detector, we want to make sure everything on our beam path is aligned to that detector in the beginning. All you have to do is just make sure this turns green. You really don't have to do anything besides turn on the alignment and let it do its own work. It turns green, and now we're ready to image. Everything is aligned relative to that those 32 elements. So now I'm just going to really quickly take, again, a stack. We're at 20x, but we're using our super resolution mode on the Airyscan detector. And this is something that I think a lot of researchers have realized since this launched over 10 years ago, that you can get improved images on these lower mag objectives just by switching to the Airyscan detector, and now you're not having to necessarily deal with oil and things. Like maybe you do need to later go back in and look at 63x and get those super res images, but even just improving your resolution at 20x on a dry objective is actually useful for a lot of different applications. And so again, here we're capturing that Z-stack using the super resolution mode. And something that you'll notice up in the top here, right, we are sampling higher because we are in super resolution mode. So we've got some easy buttons up above in the acquisition setup where we have super resolution selected. You could also just select confocal, which I did for the confocal track earlier. But we make it really easy to pick and choose basically what sampling you're using depending on what you're doing. Okay, so that was how quickly we were able to get this super resolution Airyscan track acquired for our Z-stack. And I'm going to go ahead and also save that again so we can do this side-by-side comparison later. But we're going to take a look at this specific Z-stack that I just took, and we're going to compare that to the 63x oil confocal track and see how closely those two are linked when you are, again, on a 20x 0.8 in a dry objective. I think you're going to be pretty surprised at some of what you're able to resolve using that Airyscan detector. All right, so here's our image. Just looking a little bit more closely at some of these structures, and again, I'm going to save that as our super res image so that we can know what we're looking at as we take this image 4 different times. Okay, so one way we can speed up the Airyscan detector, because we are sampling at twice, which is really 4 times the amount of pixels, as I pointed out earlier, because we were sampling twice the density to do super resolution mode, you can actually speed everything up by scanning 8 points at a time. And again, I'll go into some of the technical aspects of what that actually means, but we are basically able to make the beam span over 8 pixels at a time. And again, still have to do that quick alignment. And now that we're ready to go, it's going to go much faster in super res mode. This mode I really like for, who doesn't love speeding up their imaging, number one? So that's one thing about it. But number two, this is a really great mode if you were doing any sort of live cell work with Airyscan. And again, we're able to basically improve our numerical aperture even if you're on like a lower, maybe you're on the water objective, you're still going to see really great improvement with that. But the multi-line scanning, the multiplex mode as we call it, is really, really wonderful for any sort of live cell imaging because you're putting less light into the sample and you are going faster, which, again, you're usually trying to capture dynamic processes. And so that multiplexing mode is really great for all of those things. Also, again, some people just want to use it because any sort of trade-offs you may or may not make, depending on which multiplex mode you're using for resolution, you're still going so much faster. For most applications, you're getting all the data that you need. All right, so now we have our 3 different 20x images. I'm zooming out here because a really great trick that we have on these systems, I have AI Sample Finder, which took this dark field image that you see. I had some wide field overviews to try to map where I was in these cultured neurons on this sample. But something that often happens is when you add oil, you get lost in your sample. But because of this AI Sample Finder navigator view, I can just quickly click off and add oil. Actually, we've made a macro so that you can do that. But you can come right back to where you were without having to, again, refine where you're at, and which is one of my favorite features of any of our systems that has AI Sample Finder. is not getting lost when you switch objectives and have to add oil. So we're going to go right back to that same spot after we've switched over to the 63x. And now we're going to capture this in regular confocal mode because I want to show you how this regular confocal image at 63x compares to a 20x Airyscan image, right? Because again, I think seeing is believing. So here we are. We're in the same exact spot that we were earlier, and we're going to compare all these side by side after we take this final stack. We do have to adjust a little bit, right, because we've switched from the 20x to the 63, so our z is just a little bit shifted. But once we readjust that, we can go ahead and take our z stack really quickly, and then we'll take a closer look and inspect all of these neuronal extensions and see how they look side by side. And maybe you will decide, if you do already have an Airyscan, that you can actually go and start doing some really cool experiments on your lower mag objectives and getting just as good of resolution as you were on your 63x with confocal mode. And if you don't have an Airyscan, obviously reach out if you want to learn more and see how you could bring one into your lab. All right, so final z-stack before the moment of truth, where we're going to look at these side by side. And then again, I'll go into the technology and how that works and how this is possible. All right, now that we are done, I'm just going to check really quickly that we've acquired the whole z-stack, and now we're going to compare these side by side. So I went into the multi-splitter mode. I have my confocal 20x over here. We're going to put the super resolution image here, which again I labeled them so you can see. I know that the font is a little small. And then the super resolution 8Y mode, so the multiplexing mode, just in case we want to see how those compare to each other. Again, really great use of the multi-splitter is when you're figuring out experimental configurations and you want to compare and contrast different settings that you've used. You can get the same field of view here. So here, again, we've got the super resolution Airyscan 20x where my cursor is right now, and on the far right is actually the 63x. And I actually think the 20x Airyscan looks better than even this one. It depends, of course, on what features you're looking at. I might have to adjust in Z a little bit here. But as we look at these images, it really is amazing what you can get with a dry objective and compared to 63x confocal mode. And again, if you were like, all right, I've screened and it's this huge field of view in 20x, now I found some features that I do need to go in and get that super resolution imaging info out of, you can switch back to the 63x and now go into true super resolution mode with the Airyscan detector at 63x, and now you're going to be going past the diffraction limit of light. You're going to be able to get down to 120 nanometers very easily in Airyscan on the 63x. So if you do need to still do that, that is entirely possible. Okay, so 1 second and I will swap us here. All right, so I mentioned, right, if you really wanted to go in, this is an image that was taken on the 63x with the Airyscan super resolution setup. And so again, if you were screening something and you really needed to go zoom in later, you absolutely can do that as well and get some of these really stunning images. But I want to talk a little bit about how that actually works. And so let's go into this. Okay, so I keep talking about super resolution, and I just mentioned the diffraction, breaking the diffraction limit. I want to just reinforce what super resolution is for anybody that maybe is coming into this a little bit fresh. Confocal resolution is what we call diffraction limited, so it is directly related to the optics in your light path, but it's also directly related to the actual wavelength of light. And so the highest resolution you're able to achieve is basically half of the longest wavelength, or the shortest wavelength. So confocal resolution is limited to 240 nanometer resolution, just period. And so super resolution is when you push beyond that diffraction limit of light, and that is what the Airyscan detector is able to do. And again, I just want to remind everybody, resolution is not measuring the, around an object. If you have, let's say, a point of light here, it's not measuring around, it's measuring the difference between two different objects. That's what resolution actually is. So you're measuring the distance between two different peaks. And so Airyscan is able to get down to 120 nanometer resolution using that spatial array detector. To understand how that actually works, we're going to talk about the confocal principle, right? And so what we're normally doing in confocal imaging is we are looking at, if you look at a single point, we have a diffraction pattern around that. And so what we're actually doing with a confocal detector is we're using a pinhole to throw out the out of focus light, right? So we have the central point here, and then you have these airy rings around it. Those airy rings are what we usually basically throw out to make sure that we are optically sectioning in Z. So what we do is we close that pinhole down to what we call one airy unit. One airy unit being basically, again, that single point. And then we're throwing away all that extra light. It works great for optical sectioning, but we are throwing away a lot of light, and so if you're doing live cell imaging or if you have sensitive samples that bleach easily, that is something that's going to come into play, right? We would love to actually take all of that information of all of those outer rings and maybe incorporate that into our data so that we don't have to throw all that information away, right? And so ultimately what people have done to compromise on that with confocal imaging is you can close your pinhole down even further than that one airy unit. Some people go down to 0.2 airy units to improve their resolution and maximize the resolution by maximizing how much out of focus light you're throwing out. But then you can lose up to 95% of your signal. So again, for live samples, that's really, you're going to have a bad time. And if you have sensitive samples, it's going to, you might bleach them very quickly. So the one airy unit has been a good compromise in the past. But of course, again, we're rejecting all this emission signal and we're having to always make these trade-offs of resolution and sensitivity. And so what we're going to do in a regular confocal, just to give you the idea of how the Airyscan then plays in, confocal is always this compromise, right? We're trying to balance resolving power and signal to noise. And so usually, let's say we have the focused laser beam here in green and a dye molecule represented by the green. And we're going to scan over with a pinhole of one airy unit. This is what you would see. Okay. Now, if you wanted to maximize your Z resolution, you would close that pinhole down to maybe 0.2 airy units. But again, this is just a rehashing of what I voiced over. We're going to scan over in blue that green molecule. Yes, we have thrown out a bunch of out of focus light, but we've thrown out a lot of information with that, right? And so we're going to be much more likely to bleach our sample. Balancing resolving power with closing down your pinhole is always kind of a tricky thing. What the Airyscan does is it takes the equivalent of 1.2 airy units in size, and it breaks that up into 32 different detectors, right? So when we scan over our point of light now, we're going to capture information on all of these different detectors. Okay, so now we're not throwing away information. In fact, we're capturing more information than we would if we were closed down to one airy unit in a pinhole, and we are going to take all of that info and spatially reassign it. Okay, so just to kind of recap that, the emission of a point-like emitter looks like the top image. Typically in confocal, we're making a compromise and we're using one airy unit. We're closing the pinhole down to that size, which gives us acceptable signal to noise. The confocal detection pinhole is the optimal, the highest you can push the resolution is 0.2 airy units, and that's why our spatial array detector breaks the entire 32 units down into 0.2 airy units each, right? So now we're getting the highest resolution you can in terms of each one measures only 0.2 airy units, so you're breaking, again, this larger size down into multiple little units, and that's how we're going to use that array to capture light that we normally reject at the pinhole. And we're going to use all that light. That's how we're making it more sensitive and how we're able to basically boost your numerical aperture virtually when we are imaging at a lower mag objective. Okay, so again, traditional confocal, this is what the beam path looks like. We're going to be imaging, I can't put, my hand doesn't go over here, it disappears. But you go through your laser to your focal plane, back to the pinhole, and the pinhole is conjugate to the focal plane of the detector, in this case represented by a PMT. The Airyscan basically means you can open that pinhole up, and now the Airyscan is in the confocal plane. So that's how the beam path works. And just to sort of rehash again how all of this works, because I know the first time I learned about this when this came out around 10 years ago, it took me a couple of times to really understand the math behind this. So we're going to be looking here at, again, a single point, this time represented by blue. And we're going to show you, I'm going to show you how we capture this across the whole spatial array detector and why that makes your it improves your resolution, it improves your sensitivity. And so what we're going to do is going to scan over this point here, right? So for the first, as we're going over this point emitter, we slowly capture more and more light, right, typically. And that's how the 1 area unit PSF typically maps. But as we break this down, this is why you're limited to 240 nanometers, your full width half max. But as we go over with the Airyscan detector, now we're going to be capturing this information not just in one curve, but we're going to have 32 curves effectively, right? So let's say in the middle detector, this is what that output would look like. At first, you might be thinking, oh, but that's such less signal because it's only 0.2 area units that we're capturing that information on. But as we start to add these up, you start to get more information, right? And so we're going to walk through this. Now, if we pick a side detector and we walk through, that's the information that side detector gave us, okay? And now we'll pick these two together and you start to add this up, right? This is the math that's going on in the background. This is how we're able to push the resolution down, right? Now you have all of these different curves. You can extrapolate from those two examples. You have 32 different curves for one point that you're adding all that together. And that's why we're able to basically boost sensitivity, boost signal to noise, boost resolution, and do all of that with the spatial array detector, okay? And I mentioned speed, so I did compare in that overview earlier the super resolution mode versus what we call multiplexing mode, because we know that there's a lot of dynamic processes where you might need to go faster, and this is still a point scanning system, so we want to be able to scan up to 8 points at a time. We can go up to 4 points at a time on an LSM 910, you can go up to 8 points at a time on an LSM 990. Do things like this where we're using 8Y mode. On a resonance scanner, it would look something like this. Sure, we're going up to 80 frames per second, but there's a lot of noise in here, so we're not going to be able to make much out of this data. Versus multiplex 8Y mode on the same sample, these are cardiomyocytes, so very fast twitching heart muscle cells, and here we're actually able to capture the buckling of the tubulin. And again, these are also very sensitive cells, you can imagine. Not only are you trying to capture something that is dynamic and fast, you're also trying to capture something in a system that is very sensitive to light. So these are just some examples of what you can do in the 8Y mode in the living samples, right? But we're scanning those 8 lines at a time, which is really powerful. So I hope if you didn't know something about Airyscan before that you learned a bit more about that today. And I hope that if you did know something about Airyscan, you now know a different way that you can use that detector and complement your research. Again, going from not just using it as a super resolution detector on your highest mag objective, but actually being able to really improve your lower mag objectives with your huge field of view and screen more quickly and get beautiful data that can be comparable to what you would have taken on confocal detectors on those higher mag objectives. So with that, again, feel free to email us at the ZEISS Microscopy email address if you have any questions. We are here to support you in your research and really push science forward. Thanks so much. I think the next talk will be about SIM, structural illumination microscopy, so we're going to take a short break before that talk is up next.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to day 2. In the last session, Rebecca talked about Airyscan, how it's virtual NA improvers to do super resolution imaging on a confocal. Next, we've got a half hour on the 𝗏𝗏 family, which is my favorite instrument. This is a flexible lineup for super res imaging, live imaging, and fast optical sectioning. So once I start, you'll see about 15 minutes of me going through the different instruments in the family, talking about the theory a little bit, and then we'll be looking at some live cells, doing live imaging with a 25x multi-immersion objective, and then doing some tissue tiling. So you can see how this instrument is really suitable for spanning across scales for fixed and live samples, getting super resolution imaging using this 𝗏𝗏 modality. Thanks for your time. Hi everyone. In this session, we'll be talking about the ZEISS 𝗏𝗏 family and how we can use SIM modality to do fast optical sectioning and super resolution live imaging. So for the next 15 minutes or so, I'll go through some of the theory and applications for the 𝗏𝗏 family, and then after that, we'll jump onto the 𝗏𝗏3 to look at some tiling with a fixed tissue section and some live cell imaging using U2OS cells. So what makes this 𝗏𝗏 family? So the 3 members are the 𝗏𝗏3, the 𝗏𝗏5, and the Alyra7 with 𝗏𝗏. And the reason we have this lineup is there are a growing number of applications and growing needs to do super resolution across scales at the organoid level, tissue level, cellular level, even down to the molecular level. It's hard to do all of that on one instrument, so we've designed these 3 instruments geared towards a particular application. But at the heart of it, all of them have 𝗏𝗏. And so what is SIM? SIM stands for Structural Illumination Microscopy. And the concept behind SIM is when you have this known pattern, like this linear grid, when you pass that over an unknown pattern, like this pattern of one of the company founders, 𝗏𝗏, before we pass that pattern, we can barely resolve his face. But once we pass that known 1D pattern over, we can see that higher resolution detail and make out that it's a clear face of 𝗏𝗏. These interference patterns are called Moore fringes, and we can reveal higher resolution detail by imposing that known pattern over an unknown pattern, which would be your biological sample. And so how does SIM compare to different super resolution modalities that you might have heard of? First, there's pixel reassignment on the left, in the middle SIM, and then on the right there's STED and single molecule localization. And you can see from the spider chart down below, pixel reassignment and SIM are all-round performers where you can have decent 𝗏𝗏C resolution, they're live cell friendly, multicolor friendly, and you have good temporal resolution. STED and single molecule localization can give you more resolution. So you can see on the spider chart, they have higher 𝗏𝗏Z resolution. But what are the trade-offs? The trade-offs are that your temporal resolution may be lower, they may not be live cell friendly, or it may not be as easy to do multicolor imaging. So pixel reassignment, which is implemented as Airyscan on one of our systems that you'll see in one of the talks, and SIM are great because they're multicolor friendly, meaning you can use off-the-shelf fluorophores, Alexa fluors, GFP, and so you don't have to change anything to your sample. And because they're fast and gentle, you can do live cell imaging, where compared to STED and single molecule, it's harder to do multicolor or live cell imaging because you'll have to optimize your sample with the dyes compatible with those 2 methods. So going forward, we've implemented in our 𝗏𝗏 family a couple different ways to do SIM. So first is this 1D pattern, and we call this SIM apotome. And then second is this 2D lattice pattern, where the name 𝗏𝗏 comes from. So by using a 2D lattice pattern, we're able to resolve higher frequency information and get super resolution. Where with the 1D pattern, we're using that to do fast optical sectioning. So what it might look like when you're acquiring the data is when you're using the 𝗏𝗏 modality, we have this lattice 2D grid illuminating the sample. So we'll see this lattice pattern sparkling over the cells or the tissues that you're looking at. And then after you acquire these phases and do the computational reconstruction of those phases into one final image, you'll have a resulting super resolution image. So now going deeper into each instrument in the lineup, starting with the 𝗏𝗡 CIM3, what is this one capable of? So this one was really designed for fast optical sectioning, for looking at larger organisms like a whole Drosophila larvae or zebrafish, doing large-scale tiling of tissue sections using the CIM apotome. You can still do super resolution using the 𝗏𝗡 modality on this system and get down to 140 nanometer resolution. And the type of acquisition modes you're using, you can even have one raw image to one process image, meaning the imaging is very so that you can do live imaging over time without worrying about the samples bleaching. And to give you a few examples of that, on this slide, what we see is a Drosophila embryo. Here we're seeing the color-coded depth projection of this stain that's labeling the nervous system, taken with the 20x air lens. So with the scale bar at 50 microns, we can see the whole larvae with this 20x lens and get high optic contrast and high contrast optical sectioning to be able to resolve the entire nervous system. And then next, going one scale bigger, when we're looking at this tissue section, this is a mouse intestine. So in the first part of the movie, you see that the scale bar is 500 microns. So we're starting with the 10x overview. We're labeling the blood vessels in the green and the nerves in the white. So we start with the 10x overview where you can resolve the vasculature and how it interacts with the nerves. Then we can switch to this 25x view where we switch to that multi-immersion objective and get a higher resolution image. So within the same scope, we're already spanning the length scales where we start with that 10x overview and then we go to this 25x super resolution image using the 𝗏𝗡 modality. We can go one step smaller, looking at these organoids. So it's fair to say when we talk about fast optical sectioning, one of the first things that come to people's mind might be a spinning disk. So in this example where we're looking at these spheroids, where the mitotracker green and the nuke red are labeled, with the spinning disk is done with the 63x water objective. If you were doing this with 𝗏𝗡, you can acquire better resolution, better contrast using a 25x objective because we're using that 2D pattern to resolve more detail. So by using the 𝗏𝗡 modality, we get a better image using a 25x compared to a 60x on a spinning disk. And the field of view here is actually larger too. We're just showing a cropped view of the organoid. We can also use the 𝗏𝗡 CIM3 for super resolution imaging within cells. So here we've got the ER network labeled with stay gold in green and the mitotracker labeled with red. And in this inset, you'll see that we can see the dynamic nature of the ER network as well as the mitochondria interacting with the ER. And because the CIM is so gentle, we can even do this type of imaging overnight. So here we're looking at some yeast cells dividing overnight happily. So in that top left, we're seeing the surface protein marker. Top right, we're looking at the endosomes. On the bottom left, we're looking at vacuoles. And the bottom right, the endoplasmic reticulum. So this movie was taken over 12 hours overnight using a 40x oil lens. Each image is showing a color-coded depth projection of a Z-stack. And so you can see the yeast cells are happily dividing overnight even though we're imaging for up to 12 hours. Now, if you need more resolution than that, next comes the bigger brother of the CIM3, which is the 𝗏𝗡 CIM5. Here, it's based on the same principles of the CIM apotome and 𝗏𝗡 to get super resolution. But here, we've optimized the light path so that we can achieve 60 nanometer resolution. So if you remember, in the previous section, CIM3 was capable of 140 nanometer resolution. So now with that 60 nanometer resolution and the ability to image at higher magnification, we can go into more detail when we're looking at dynamic events in live cells. So here we're looking at LifeAct GFP in these U2A cells. So you can see the protrusions of the actin in this depth-coded projection. And then next, this is a movie of TOM20 labeled in the cyan, so labeling the mitochondria, and the EB3 labeling these microtubule binding tips. So we can see the dynamic nature of both the mitochondria and microtubules using the 63x lens and have a super resolution image where we can resolve those fine details in the mitochondria. This one is one of my favorite movies ever. This is a movie taken on the lattice SIM5 using a 63x oil lens of these 𝗏7 cells, labeling the ER. This movie is really amazing because this was done for 10 minutes at 10 frames per second, equaling 5,000 time points. So, it's a little bit like staring into a campfire. I could look at this movies all day. And right now we're barely under 2 minutes in, and the movie still has, 8 minutes to play. So if you really stare at these, you can see how dynamic the endoplasmic reticulum is, and you can see all the branches reaching out and rearrangement of that network. And as much as I'd like to play this movie to the finish, I'll move on to the next slide. So finally, here we're looking at, again, the cow reticulum, which is labeling for the ER in the magenta, and then in the green are the microtubules with the EMTB labeling. So now if we look at the zoomed in inset, here we're resolving down to 60 nanometer, where when the microtubules are interacting with each other, we can see all the individual fibers, where if we didn't have this super resolution modality, we might not see these individual fibers, but we might just resolve an entire bundle. So because we're able to achieve down to 60 nanometer resolution using lattice SIM on the SIM5, we can see all these fine details and dynamic rearrangement of the microtubule network. And finally, next is the ELIRA 7 with lattice SIM. This can do what the SIM do, but it has capabilities for single molecule localization, where we can go down to about 20 nanometer resolution using single molecule imaging. And this instrument really is geared for those core facilities that really need to push imaging to the highest level and access to the users. An example of that is here we're using 3D single molecule localization to look at these nuclear pore markers in a 𝗁 cell. And here we're actually even looking at a depth-coded projection of about 1.5, 1.3 microns Z-stack. Normally, when you do single molecule imaging, this is a 2D technique, but we have a proprietary technology to do 3D single molecule imaging using a phase ramp, so we're able to acquire this 3D image in one capture. And here's a couple zoom-in insets showing that we can resolve the individual complexes of the individual subunits of the nuclear pore complex. And scale bar here is 200 nanometer resolution, so you can see with each nuclear pore being about 200 nanometers in diameter, if you were using a confocal, spinning disk, or thing not super resolution, we wouldn't be able to resolve these details and these individual subunits. So finally, now that I'm at the end of my talk, I'd like to switch over to the SIM3 instrument, where we'll look at some tissue section, live cells, and show you how the system operates. So now we've got some live cells on the stage, labeling Rab endosomes with GFP. So if we zoom in here, we're using a 25x water immersion lens. And so we've got a fairly large field of view, which is about 208 by 208 microns. You can see this colony of cells where there's about 20 or so cells using this lower magnification. But because we're using the lattice SIM modality, we can get a super resolution image using this objective. As we zoom into these cells, we'll see this speckly pattern, which is the lattice pattern. And if I play this movie, you'll see the phases that it takes to reconstruct one image. So here I'm doing 9 phases. And if I bring up a live image, we can see that lattice pattern moving over the sample. And I can focus on the sample by making sure my grids are sharp and in focus. If I don't see the grids, it means I'm out of focus. So I'm focused somewhere within the middle of one of these layer of cells, and then I'm set. So with my 50 milliseconds exposure, it'll take 9 phases, so each time point should be approximately about 500 milliseconds or so. If I want to go faster, I can acquire with a faster frame rate. So now what I'll do is I'm going to save this data, label the cells 25x to my SSD, and acquire for 10 seconds. I'll keep my definite focus locked on so that I don't have any drift during the 10 seconds, not that I would expect any. But because I have the definite focus, might as well use it. So now I'll hit Start Experiment to acquire this 10-second moving using the lattice sim, and I should get about 20 time points in here. Great. Now that this movie's done, we can see the 20 time points. So we can see some of the smaller endosomes moving, some of the bigger ones are slightly stationary, and then if we play through the phases, we can see the sparkle pattern, which will reveal some higher resolution information. So let me go ahead and process that. And I'm just using the default parameters using sim² processing, and I'll hit apply. One of the things we can also do is once we understand what type of processing parameters we like to use on this sample, we can use the direct processing over here and include the sim processing and offload the processing to an offline PC, which will process as you're acquiring. But you can tell that the sim processing is quite fast. For the 20 time points, it took just a few seconds. So now if we compare the raw data to the processed data, we can see a lot of the background has been removed after the sim processing. And if we zoom into this cell over here, we can resolve some of those endosomes as well as some of the smaller particles. And if I play through the time points, you can see how dynamic these endosomes are. So let's take a look at just the sim processed image. I'll put a scale bar in here so we can see how much we're resolving. So overall, we're getting, using the 25x objective, a large field of view, so we can get about 20 or so cells. And then looking at the particles we have in here in these endosomes and what we resolve, you would expect this was taken with something like a 40 or 63x lens using a spinning disk. However, with the lattice sim, we're getting the best of both worlds. We're getting high resolution information as well as large field of view. So I'm just speeding up the movie over here so we can see that we're able to track all of these endosomes, even the smaller ones that are zipping around, the larger ones a little bit more stationary. So as I zoom in, you can see some of the smaller particles are about on the order of 200 nanometers or so. We're not quite going to resolve those whole structures of those endosomes, but from some of the bigger ones, about 300 or 400 nanometers, we can resolve those. And in just this 10-second movie, I already have so much to analyze because I've got about 20 cells, and within each cell, there's so much dynamic behavior going on. Normally, when I was a postdoc doing this, I would take 20 positions to take movies of 20 different cells using a 63x lens, but now I can do all of that in just one snapshot using the 25x. Another cool thing we can do is, because we took these 21 time points and we had 9 phases, we can do what's called burst processing and do a rolling processing as well. So by doing that, we can get more time points. So instead of waiting for each chunk of 9 phases to process into one final image, we can do this burst mode and do a sliding window reconstruction. So if I do a sliding window reconstruction every 3 slices, it's going to process 1 time point for every 3 phases. So now I should get 60 time points out of this movie. But if I use a sliding window of 1, I will even get 21 times 9. That would be 180-ish time points. So I'll do a sliding window of 3 and process that movie again so that we can see how much speed we can gain during the playback using this burst mode processing. While it's doing that, let me put a timestamp on here and a scale bar. So we're going to add a scale bar here and a timestamp. Let's change this to milliseconds. We'll change the color of this scale bar to white, as well as the text. Here now, because we're processing additional frames, the processing you can see took a little bit longer than before, but the result is worth it because we will get 60 frames. So now as we play through this movie side by side, you can see over here, this is a 10-second movie where we got, so when we look into and zoom in, we can see some of these particles moving, but the motion is not as smooth as it could be. And by doing the burst processing, we're able to get a movie that's much smoother. And let me just change the scale bar to milliseconds instead. And get 61 frames. So now we're playing back at a frame rate of about 7 frames per second. And now if I zoom into some of these movies, you can see these particles are moving a little bit slower, almost as if they're stationary. That's because I have now 3 times more frames than I did before. So if I increase the playback rate on this, we'll see that the particles move a little bit smoother compared to the movie that I processed with just the 20 frames. So if I want this to go even faster, I can even sample this with a sliding window of 1, then I would have 180 frames in this movie. What this gives me is an ability to tune my playback rate after the acquisition. So there's a lot of flexibility there. So if you capture with this 2 frames per second rate, as I did, but you find that you're missing some dynamics or you want the movie to go a little faster, instead of lowering the exposure and acquiring faster, you can actually just process this differently using that burst mode. Now we've got a tissue sample on the microscope. This is a cleared kidney sample with some labeling for the vessels and for the nerves. For the sake of time, I've already taken a few Z-stacks and some tiling to show you the results. Over here, we are using a 10x objective, and what we're seeing is the raw data of 60 slices sampled every 2.75 microns. So what that means is we're taking about 170 micron volume over here with the 2 colors. In the green, you can see all the vessels and the grid lines. In the magenta, you can see the nerves. And then we can see where all the vessels are meeting at the glomeruli of the kidney. This volume took just about 30 seconds. And so if we were to interpolate and see how long it would take for tiling the whole tissue, you might see that it might take 5-10 minutes. If we were to do the whole tissue, it might take a few hours. And now, one way we can go faster is by using what we call leap mode. So under the Z-stack window over here, you can see 2 options. With the optimal sampling, we're sampling every 2.75 microns. With the leap sampling, we're sampling every 8 microns. And here we're taking advantage of the fact that the sim pattern, the lines you see over here, is not just projected in the XY, but also in the Z. So with the sim pattern being 3-dimensional, we can take advantage of that and capture that information in between the Z planes. So by doing this leap sampling, we only acquire every 3rd plane, and then we can extrapolate that information in the middle and between planes from the sim pattern being projected in 3D. So what that means is over here with the leap acquisition, we only have to acquire 20 slices to go through that 170-ish micron volume, and then we still get an optically sectioned result where we get all 60 planes back. So we have planes from 0 to 170 microns every 2.75 microns. And if we put the 2 side by side, on the left-hand side is the optimal sampling, on the right-hand side is the leap sampling. And as I play through this movie, you'll see that the resolution and the contrast between the optimal sampling and leap sampling are nearly identical. So the leap sampling is a really good way to improve your acquisition speed if you're tiling large tissues, or even doing live imaging where you need faster Z-stacks. So now with the leap sampling, I can bring down this volume to about 10 seconds in acquisition. Yet I'm still acquiring a large field of view where I've got in 10 seconds 2 channels, 660 by 660 micron XY field of view, and 60 slices covering 160 microns. So now if we extrapolate that, and let's say we do something like a 4x4 tile over here, which is 16 tiles. I've already done that over here. And this is the process result of the 4x4 tiles. This volume took just a little bit under 4 minutes, and the total area we captured is actually 2.5 by 2.5 millimeters, and then covering 200 microns with 75 slices. And so something like this took only 4 minutes. If we were doing this on a confocal, we'd probably expect it to take an hour or longer. And now if we take that 4 minutes, if we were tiling the whole tissue where we needed 172 tiles, you can see that if we cover the whole tissue, 4 minutes times about 12, we would get less than an hour to tile the whole tissue. If we were doing this on a confocal, we'd probably imagine it would take overnight to tile the entire kidney tissue with the number of Z slices we're taking. Hopefully that gives an idea of how the SIM can be used for live imaging as well as large-scale optical section for tiling. Thank you everyone for your attention. I hope that was informative and you learned a little bit about the lattice SIM capabilities for live imaging, super resolution imaging, and for tiling at large scales. We'll be taking a 15-minute break and then we'll come back around 11:15 Western time for the next session.
Hi everyone, welcome back after a short break for session 3 of our live workshop. My name is Amita Gurur and I'm coming to you live from the ZEISS Microscopy Customer Center in Dublin, California. A warm welcome to all of you. So this session, I'll be focusing on automatic tissue detection on our Axioscan 7, which is a high-throughput slide scanner. So just as AI has revolutionized many areas of our daily lives, it has in microscopy too. Attended my session yesterday on microscopy co-pilot. We have been using AI for many aspects of microscopy as well, from tissue detection, image analysis, and also for co-pilot. So in today's session, I'll be talking very specifically about how you can utilize AI models for specifically for sample detection, especially that now we have incorporated AI model for tissue detection even in our newest offering of spatial biology, Axioscan. So very quickly, let me review the current methodology for tissue detection on the Axioscan. So if you have bright field sections which are chromogenically stained, it's very easy to detect them just by threshold methodology. It will detect with a green border around the tissue just upon previewing that slide. If you have a faint fluorescent tissue section, you can use a Sharpie mark around the tissue on a slide and use the Sharpie mark with our marker method to detect the sample, and it's going to scan everywhere within the Sharpie mark. So that's one method. Another one that we have used is utilizing a fluorescent channel, such as DAPI, as you see on the screen, or autofluorescence. So we use a low mag objective and then do a scan of the entire slide and use the intensity coming from that channel to detect the tissue. So that's another method where we call it the DAPI pre-scan based tissue detection. However, this is time consuming and it does have the prospect of bleaching your sample. So in order to move away from all of this, we have also tried to stain sections with Sudan Black B, which gives some intensity to your sections, and use that to detect samples as well. So this is all prior to AI. These have been some of the different methodologies for detecting tissue sections in an automated fashion. And of course, the painstaking method, which if you've been in the doing slide scanning for a while, if all fails, you of course draw manually, but we want to move away from the manual method because it's an automated slide scanner. And my goal is to just push a button and walk away and let the system do everything from detecting the sample, scanning, and giving me data, and also maybe analysis, which you will catch in the next session. So the focus for today's talk, in my lightning talk, is utilizing AI models. In this example, which was one of the most exciting examples I've had with utilizing the AI model, is detecting an ROI on your tissue sample and scanning just that ROI. So the way we like to say it is, if your eye can see it, AI will do the job in training and detecting that region on the Axioscan. So what you see on the screen is, by the traditional method with threshold, you can detect the entire brain section. This is a Golgi stained brain section sample on a slide. So the green border that you see around every tissue section is the automated tissue detection, the typical default method for tissue detection. On the bottom, you see tiny hippocampus region that's detected on section 1, 2, and 3. How did we go about doing this? So essentially, you can train on our Airyscan cloud platform by segmenting the region that you want to detect. So what you see here, toggling through the different brain section images. So basically, you image and with a a preview image. So utilize the preview image to create your AI model. So essentially, you're painting the areas that you want detected. So I have 10 preview images here loaded on our Airyscan cloud platform. And literally, you're saying what is background and what is your area to detect or an ROI. And with that model, you can upload that into our ZEISS slide scan. And I'm going to walk you through the workflow where with the model that was created on the Airyscan cloud platform, you essentially incorporate that within the scan profile of the ZEISS slide scan software. So what you see me doing here is you start the preview scan and allow 16 seconds for the image analysis setting to apply, and it automatically just detects the hippocampus region on the brain section. And that's detecting just your ROI of interest, not the entire brain section. It's just your ROI that was detected based on the AI model. And then it doesn't stop there. So the detection was an ROI, but the Axioscan will go on to scan that region. So when I click on Start Scan, it starts to scan those detected ROI, and you can even incorporate a 3D Z-stack in your scan profile. So I like to look at 3 or 6 different mustaches on the brain section. So it goes from one to the other. And when you uncheck the scenes, you have all of these show up. So just imagine the efficiency of just being able to scan your ROIs of interest, not the unnecessary region, which is also in terms of data handling, a very efficient way of just focusing on your region of interest to scan. So in this workflow, what you saw me doing was create an AI model for your ROI on Airyscan Cloud, apply that image analysis setting within the scan profile, and start scan. It'll detect just your ROIs and scan just the ROIs. So that's start to finish, just detecting an ROI and scanning that ROI either in 2D or 3D. And of course, it doesn't stop there. If you're interested in doing spine segmentation, you can apply our image analysis routine as well and incorporate that as well. So looking at other examples, you can also have tissue types. So here you see we had an AI model built just to detect heart, pancreas, kidney, and spleen. So these are very good examples of how you can detect ROIs even within a tissue sample. Moving along, we have now tried to use the AI models on a multitude of different types of sections, not just, you saw me show you the brain section example that was a chromogenic stain, but here we have fluorescent tissue sections, which are very faint, and it's not easy to see these sections when you hold the slide against the light, right? So again, what you see me doing now, I had a box of these slides. So manually drawing is very painstaking. So I utilize the AI Airyscan Cloud platform again, got the preview scans from all of these brain sections, loaded them onto the platform, and you can just draw a couple of, you don't have to do all of them, just a couple, and then train them. So what we have learned from this exercise is the more preview images you feed to the platform, your model just becomes better and better. So if you started off with like a 70% detection, it's just that the more preview images I load, the model gets to become more robust. So with that, I was able to get near perfection automatic detection with the AI model. So with the preview images loaded and the model created, I then loaded that onto my slide scan software and utilized that model to detect these very faint brain sections. So what you see, I'm hiding the image on my left, but it's essentially slides that have been automatically detected utilizing the model that was built on the Airyscan Cloud platform. And so here is an example showing you both coronal brain sections and sagittal brain sections beautifully detected with the AI model. So once you have this incorporated, it automatically just becomes part of the scan profile, and you can utilize it. You do not have to retrain the model over again. So another example of a large format brain section utilizing the AI trained model. And then finally, we also have examples from retina section. So if you watch on the left, just utilizing the regular detection methodology, you can see a lot of regions that are marked outside the tissue section. So it's detecting the cover glass, it's detecting other regions that are not part of the tissue sample. But on the right panel, utilizing the AI model to specifically detect just the retina section, you can see a big difference between the left panel and the right panel, where on the right, it's just detecting the retina section. So, having done on lung sections, retina sections, brain sections, it just gives us more and more confidence that the AI model is the way to go in detecting tissue samples on a slide scanner. And another final example coming from a customer who utilized the marker method to detect all the tissue sections. This was a very painstaking method for them. They used a diamond scribe and then the cryo sections on the slide with a Sharpie mark. It is quite tedious to do this on hundreds of slides. So we created an image analysis setting and incorporated that. And what you see on the video is that green border finding every section on each of these slides. This was completely automated for the customer with no hands-on effort at all. And data handling as well. So you just scan the area that you're interested in and ignore everything else. So in long term, it helps with data handling as well. So with that, I hope that you walk away learning from this session that AI models created absolutely are very effective in detecting tissue sections on a slide scanner. So thank you for watching. We will be back with the next session. Hi, everyone. Welcome back after a short break. We are on the 4th session of our live workshop from the ZEISS Microscopy Customer Center in Dublin, California. My name is Amita Gurur, and I'm back with another session featuring our Axioscan, but this time it's the Spatial Biology Axioscan. And the topic is one-click slide scanning. So let's go. So the topic of my session is one-click slide scanning and analysis for spatial biology. And again, at the end of this session, I would want you to walk away that you can conduct your entire workflow for spatial biology with a single click. A lot of effort has gone behind in incorporating a multitude of steps into one single click, and I hope I can share that effort with you in a workflow video as well. So spatial biology has many applications in immuno-oncology, infectious diseases, inflammation, metabolic diseases, to name a few. However, if we focus just on the field of immuno-oncology, you have slides that have been well prepared, and then you have, if you have access to a system like the Axioscan, which is a high-throughput slide scanner, which can do imaging of your multiplex immunofluorescence slides, it can give you a subcellular resolution, and also in combination with imaging, give you the workflow gives you access to cell segmentation and phenotyping, and at the end you walk away having in-depth knowledge of spatial analysis of your project. So some of the challenges that plague routine spatial biology workflows today are that the multiplex immunofluorescence is quite complicated. The protocol is complicated. Just to finalize on a panel of fluorophores and having a good staining protocol, the process is quite manual and cumbersome. You have limited throughput. The results are not consistent. I know from speaking with customers, every staining round does not give you consistent results. These are everyday pain points with the workflow, and data analysis is very complex. So to address all of these issues that we have been learning, listening to customers, talking to them, and trying to understand the pain points in the spatial biology realm, we have come up with some solutions. For example, we have come up in partnering with Ultiview and Chromigon. I'm going to talk about it in the next couple of slides. We have pre-optimized reagent kits that will help with the staining aspect of the workflow, and seamless automation that comes with the high-throughput slide scanner, which is the Axioscan. From image to results, you can slide up to 100 slides per run. The instruments at different locations are all optimized to give you image quality that looks very similar, and you have pre-trained AI analysis that is loaded onto the software to help alleviate the manual process of tissue detection. So that process is automated as well. Just to give you a glimpse of our end-to-end spatial biology workflow bundle, you have access to the reagent kit for the staining aspect, and then imaging is on the Axioscan 7 spatial biology unit, and this comes preloaded with a software called SlideStream, and which is extremely user-friendly, and you will watch me click around in the workflow video, which I'll play next. And the bundle on one end has license to the MindPeak software for analysis. And the one-click workflow that I will show you takes you all the way from scanning to upload to the server for analysis utilizing the MindPeak software. So these were the two kits that I was talking about from Ultiview So if you have a 4-plex plus DAPI, or up to 8-plex on the Chromnigon kit, we have a filter set specifically utilizing for spectral separation of all of the 8 channels using the Chromnigon staining kit. So this is just an example coming from the Chromnigon kit for multiplex immunofluorescence. Beautiful separation of all 8 channels using the streptoclick methodology. And let's focus on the imaging aspect on the Axioscan 7, and I'm going to toggle to the video on the microscope. So what you're seeing on the screen now is the slide stream software. Very clean interface. I have 2 slides loaded on the tray, and each of the slides has been stained with the UltiView kit and the Chromnigon kit. So you have a 5-plex and an 8-plex with these 2 kits, and doesn't stop you from loading your entire Axioscan, all of the 25 trays with 4 slides, your 100 slides. But the main aspect here is on the top. You see me clicking on one button, which is Run Workflow. So just clicking on that one button automatically previews the slide and pulls up the information from the barcode. So what does that information contain? It tells you the slide name, it tells you the tissue type, it tells you all of the channels that have been used for imaging, the assay used, for example, the T-ACT assay with the UltiView kit. It even links that information to the analysis routine that will be utilized on MindPeak. So imagine this, you just have the barcode, or you can have text recognition, but that information tells the scanner everything about that slide. So all you're doing is just running the workflow and walking away. So it could be 2 slides, it could be 100 slides. You just select the slide and click on Run Workflow. So essentially, right now the software went from previewing, which is taking an image of the slide label, reading the barcode, and scanning with pre-configured scan profiles. Everything is optimized and loaded on the system, and automatic upload. So the status, I like to see it as a pizza tracker. If you ordered pizza from different vendors, it goes and it takes you to the final step, which is upload. So it went from previewing to automatic tissue detection, which is based on AI model loaded onto the system, detects the sample, scans it with the pre-configured scan profile, and automatically uploads it to the server. So the different status that you see there, and now it says done, which means upload is complete. So it went from previewing to automatic tissue detection to scanning to upload, all with the click of that one single button. And to me, this is a very clean interface. Does not stop you from applying each of those individual buttons in isolation, but our goal here is to scan hundreds and hundreds of slides. And what you see me doing there was, once the upload is complete, you click on that button in SlideStream software, the globe icon, and it automatically launches you on the MindPeak server. So you are able to visualize the data that was collected on the MindPeak platform. And what I'm doing there is toggling between individual channels, so you can hide and you can show each of those different channels. You can adjust the intensity just as you would on your regular imaging software. It has all of these functionalities. And if you're happy with the data, you can click on accept or decline. Once you accept the data, you start analysis with another single click. Now, as I mentioned, the analysis routine was automatically assigned in the SlideStream software, which is, again, automatically done as it recognizes. On the MindPeak software here, you watch me doing marking ROIs. So here it's telling me which of the cells are tumor or stroma. So you can get a density of tumor and non-tumor, area, abundance, a lot of information that just comes by visualizing the phenotypic markers on your tissue section. You can also name these ROIs on the software, and once you're done, you can create a report at the end. I think the video now progresses to clicking on the report generation and finding an Excel, downloading an Excel that has all of the details from your analysis. So yes, so basically right now what I'm doing is I am toggling between I'm accepting the image quality of that particular sample. This was slide 1, the T-ACT sample, and I'm selecting that particular slide, clicking on report generation, and then you can review the Excel sheet with all of these different parameters that has been generated with the image. So essentially, that was the workflow that I wanted to walk you through, which is, just to recap, it's that one button on the top right that says Run Workflow. Essentially, a combination of multiple steps that goes from automatic scanning to upload in one slick step. So with that, I will just toggle back to my presentation and very quickly walk you through a few other topics on the system. So the other highlights on the spatial biology instrument is automatic tissue detection that I wanted to double down on, because it takes away all of the manual effort that you would typically do if you had very faint tissue sections. So we have loaded thousands and thousands of images, more than 3,000 preview images to train these AI models. And I noticed that I have not shared my PowerPoint. Let me do that very quickly. There you go. Okay, so few other points is that like I mentioned, automatic tissue detection has been incorporated into the spatial biology Axioscan. Many preview images loaded. Few other topics as we progress here is high dynamic range imaging as well. So essentially, this takes away all of the pain of setting exposure times, especially if you have been working with multiple rounds where you have very dim and very bright areas. And if you do not have this feature of HDR, you have these very saturated pixels, right? So with the HDR imaging, the dynamic range is expanded, and you do not see any saturated pixels anymore. So it's a very easy way of setting exposure times. And then finally, we have this feature called fluorescence intensity normalization, which will allow the data coming from multiple instruments looking uniform. So there is a calibration that happens at the factory. And if you have multiple units at different locations, the data is normalized, and you have the confidence of obtaining similar looking data from multiple units. One more exciting feature is co-registration coming from cyclic staining. So if you have a protocol where you're doing multiple rounds of staining, you want to have a way of co-registering all of those images coming from multiple rounds. So basically, the spatial biology Axioscan has the module for co-registration coming from the SlideStream software and Zen as well, which allows you to have pixel perfect registration. So this is a very exciting feature, again, available on our spatial biology system. So with that, I want to recap the end-to-end workflow offering on our spatial biology system. The main takeaway from this session is that you will have access to staining kits, and the spatial biology Axioscan comes preloaded with AI-trained models for automatic tissue detection and pre-configured scan profiles, which do not need optimization because they have been pre-configured and loaded in the factory. And the SlideStream software, which gives you ease of use operation. So all you have to do is run workflow, because it takes care of all of the individual steps in the scanning process. And on the other end of the workflow is having access to the MindPeak software, which is our analysis platform. So once the data is automatically uploaded onto the server, it can be analyzed using pre-trained loaded models on the MindPeak software as well. So again, as a user, I don't have to have a background in image analysis, because the SlideStream software comes loaded with pre-trained model for tissue detection, and the MindPeak software comes loaded with pre-trained models for image analysis as well. So a lot of effort has gone through making this entire workflow very seamless and efficient. And so my goal was to give you a glimpse on with the workflow video. So thank you for joining us. And with this, we will go on a break and come back. Thank you.
Hey, and welcome back. My name is Rebecca Duffy, and I'm one of the scientists here on our Digital Customer Engagement Center team coming out of the ZMCC, our Microscopy Customer Center in Dublin, California. So what I'm going to talk to you guys about today is how we can use the new Lightfield 4D to very rapidly screen a 384 well plate of organoids. And so just to give you a little bit of context for this, my background actually before I joined ZEISS was in biotech. I was working on in vitro models. I was a tissue engineer, and so I'm very, very familiar with the pain points of how to rapidly screen things and look at things in 3D in these model tissues, and how oftentimes we're having to compromise and make trade-offs, right? Because you have to screen something as quickly as possible, but you also want to get as accurate of data as possible. That's why we're moving into these model organisms that are more like 3D tissues rather than flat cells on glass, or even trying to move away sometimes from animal models. And actually, I want to highlight here this plate that we're going to look at today was given to us by 𝗏, who are some of our collaborators. They're a really wonderful company that is working on trying to make human 3D models, organoid models in multi-well formats more available for all scientists to basically perform their research so that you don't have to spend as much time generating the model itself, but you can focus more on the actual application of choice or the treatment of choice. Anyways, so again, very familiar with the idea that when you're trying to screen these, oftentimes if you're looking at them under a microscope, you're having to make a trade-off of, well, maybe I need to get this, however many well plates of this treatment done in a day today, so I'm only going to be able to image, one slice or a couple of slices in confocal or spinning disk or even wide field mode, and you're going to have to hope that that is representative of that entire 3D, sample, which often is not the case. I think any of us who have been working with 3D organoids, 3D tissues, can say that it's not quite that homogeneous, and that's kind of the point as we're moving into these more complex models. So what I'm going to show you today is how the Lightfield 4D can screen this whole plate and actually capture that 3D information in a snap. All right, and it's really exciting. And we're going to pair that with 𝗏ηs analysis, because while I like to sit and look at the pretty images on the microscope because I am a microscopist, what we really care about at the end of the day is actually getting that data out into something meaningful to then get a readout and compare all of your conditions and draw meaningful conclusions from. So we're going to use something that we call Zen guided acquisition paired with 𝗏ηs. This is just basically a one-click option in our software so that we can quickly screen and then go to high mag imaging. All right. So the workflow that I'm going to show you looks like this. We're going to do a 2D low mag screen on this 384 well plate of spheroids. And these spheroids that I actually have today are co-cultures of, I believe, HCT116 cancer cells and fibroblasts. So we'll see those in green and red. And then they're also counterstained with DAPI. So we have three colors here that we're going to snap pictures of. But we're going to screen and find where they are in the plate first. Right, that's often a painstaking, time-consuming part, but we're going to do that very quickly. And the next step is going to be analyzing those images that were snapped quickly, finding the XY coordinates of where the organoids or spheroids are in each of those wells, and then we want to come back in with our higher mag objective. In this case, I'm going to use a 20x because I know the 20x dry objective with the Lightfield detector is going to capture that entire spheroid, and we're still going to be able to resolve at a cellular level and segment those cells out to get a full understanding of the composition of each organoid in each plate. All right, so low mag screen, figure out where the organoids are, go back to a higher mag objective and snap all three colors, and then we're going to segment and analyze that in 𝗏ηs and get a wonderful heat map out, which actually translates, of course, into data in an Excel sheet or whatever format you need to import into your statistical software. Sorry, jumping the gun. All right, so we're going to go right into the Zen software in a second, but first, this is the microscope that I'm imaging these on. The new Lightfield 4D detector is available either on the LSM 910, which is what's sitting here, or the 990. The 910 here, you can see we've got configured with incubation setup, so it's got CO2 and humidity that can connect to the stage over here. If you are doing live cell, this is an example of a fixed cell system, and of course the 3-channel Airyscan detector over there. But we are going to be focusing on the Lightfield detector today, which is our new and exciting 3D imaging detector. It's camera-based. It gives you 37 different views. I'm actually going to give a lightning talk after the break after this where you can learn more about that. And just a reminder that all of our LSMs are fully customizable, configurable. You can see the stack here for ours in the lab has all of the bells and whistles. So we have a hardware autofocus that we call definite focus. We have the capability to do triggering. We have a piezo stage, and of course the laser launch sitting below. So, but whatever you need for your lab and your budget, we can always customize that and configure it. But now I'm going to go in and we're going to put that 384 well plate on the stage here. So we're just going to, this is of course an inverted microscope because it is built, intended for a lot of live cell applications or well plates. And so we're going to move that transmitted light arm back and snap in our 384 well plate of organoids with, again, 3 colors that we're going to image today for this workflow. And so once we get that on the system, we're going to port right over into the ZEN software. ZEN software is what controls all of our microscopes. And what I'm going to do first is actually, we're going to launch right in. All I did was a quick plate calibration for the 384 well plate. So we know exactly where we are in all of our wells for this 2D low mag screen that we're going to do first. Okay, again, 2D screen, find the coordinates, and then we'll be able to image at higher mag. So you can see I have our underlying carrier selected here. This is all of these little individual wells are actually where you will find the well because I've calibrated the plate. So if you want to image all of those wells in this workflow, we're going to highlight all of them and we're going to add a position to each of those wells. And I'm doing this within an experiment that is specifically going to snap everything in a wide field equivalent. So we are using a confocal detector in this setup for the screen, but what I'm doing here is a really nifty trick that you can use. You can open your pinhole all the way so that it is basically a wide field image. We're not throwing out any light. And I'm just going to snap this really quickly and make sure my settings are appropriate. I'm just using DAPI. And again, here, right, for the screening step, all I care about is locating where that organoid is. We don't need to go pixel by pixel at a high resolution. We just need to drop to the fastest scanning speed possible that will actually identify those organoids. So that's what I have set up here. Wide open pinhole, using DAPI to excite an image, basically the lowest pixel scanning density possible because it's a point scanning setup so that it'll snap very quickly and find where those organoids are in each well at the equivalent of 5x. We're actually on a 10x objective and I'm zoomed out to 0.45 so we can get that huge field of view. And now what I just want to do before we do our one-click run, you do want to always double check your settings, right? Because every plate is a little bit different. So I'm going to take a snap and then I'm going to bring this over into the analysis settings that I have designed for this workflow. And I'm going to run the analysis to make sure it is, in fact, identifying where my organoid is. If it did not do a good job, which it did do a good job here, if it was a little bit different because maybe my imaging settings are a little bit different than the last time I ran it, you can go into interactive analysis, tweak those settings, save it, and then apply it to the guided acquisition so that it's appropriately finding, in this case, the XY coordinates of each organoid here. But I'm happy with my screening settings, I'm happy with my image analysis settings, and I've already pre-configured my Lightfield 4D 3-channel track. So now all I have to do is go into the Applications tab, and we're going to go to Guided Acquisition. Right, so here's where we can walk through and we're going to set up the experimental settings that we're pulling from, which is what I just showed you where I mapped out that plate and I set up that wide open pinhole confocal track. That's how we're screening these. And then you can set which objective you want to use in that initial screening. So here, because I'm zoomed out 0.45, I'm actually getting basically 4.5 or 5x equivalent on that 10x for my field of view to screen. We're going to use those analysis settings that I just chose. You pick which analysis configuration you want, so you can have a bunch of different ones set up on your system to do all sorts of different guided acquisition workflows. And then we want to come back in again for our high mag, snap the full spheroid at 20x in 3 colors, and that's that Lightfield 4D experiment configuration that I've made, and I'm loading that in. So from here, we really are just going to hit start, and then it's going to do all those steps for me, right? I will not make you watch the entire acquisition because while it is super fast how quickly we're capturing this all in 3D, I think nobody really wants to sit and watch it acquire for the whole 30 minutes. So I'm going to put a stopwatch on so that we can use a little bit of movie magic as we do this. So again, first step here, you're going to watch it acquire through that full 384 well plate. the DAPI overview, just again, quick snap. All we care about is where is that organoid. We want to go as fast as possible. And I am using the hardware autofocus, which again, we can configure within the guided acquisition itself or the experiment that you're pulling in from. Here I've set it up to basically autofocus and find the bottom of the well and the offset. That's what the hardware autofocus does for every like 5 wells. You can do more or less depending, again, on your specific sample and how frequently you're noticing that it might be shifted. Okay, now that we've screened the whole thing, we're ready to go already after like about 6 minutes into the Lightfield acquisitions. This is going to go really fast because we have 384 to get through, but we're snapping all of these in 3 colors. You can see each time it's referring back to that table of analysis that it performed from the screen to find the XY coordinates in each well. It's also going to skip wells that were blank. Some of these, were lost during washing and staining. So now we don't have to waste time on those wells, and it's going to take around 30 minutes to snap all of these images in 3-color 3D, right? This is a wide field technique, technically, because it's a camera-based technique, but because we're using these 37 different micro lenses to look at and capture each view, that's how we're getting the 3D data in a snap. And if you missed the lightning talk yesterday, I will repeat it after a little bit of a break after this so that you can understand the technology behind the process here, right? But again, I just want to reiterate, we're not sacrificing anything to go this quickly, really. Normally, you would have to go at this speed, you would be taking just a 2D snap or a couple of different 2D snaps and trying to make conclusions and draw conclusions from that. But here we're actually capturing 3D data, we're capturing that whole spheroid, all right? One last step I'm going to do, because a lot of times with techniques like this, there is a processing step, and I don't want to skip out on that. So we were capturing the raw data within 30 minutes, including screening time, but I will batch process all of these. So I'll apply the Lightfield 4D processing, because again, we are combining information from 37 different views to get that 3D data set. So I just drag all these in Zen. You can very quickly drag it in, apply your processing settings, apply the same processing settings, which is really important, right? We want to be consistent. And then once we have that data, we are going to port it into Airyscan, our analysis software, so that we can really get as much information as possible. But again, just to give you an idea of the timing on this, right, we can image to process in about 40 minutes. So now we're going to jump into the segmentation and analysis in Airyscan. So here you can see a 3D view of what one of these spheroids in one of these wells looks like. And something you might be thinking to yourself is, Rebecca, there's cells everywhere though. If I try to analyze this, I always have to spend so much time either like processing out the border of the well, which is a common thing that happens, or dealing with all these cells on the outside and have to pull that out of my analysis. We can very easily tell Airyscan and train Airyscan to only segment and give us information on things within this container of the organoid. So we can use deep learning to basically train Airyscan to only segment those cells. We don't care about anything outside of that, including the edge of the well here or any of the cells that happen to come out of the spheroid and culture on glass. And so the way that we can do that is it's really just like coloring for adults, which is really nice. That's how easy it is to do some of these deep learning models now. So what we're going to do is segment everything to only recognize what is inside of the spheroid or organoid. And I'll jump into that. So, right, we can see very clearly here that we're only with the cells inside of this. Okay, so we basically go into our AI assisted mode here, and this is how we're going to make this deep learning model. We are going to label, in this case, I care about the spheroid and the background. So I'm going to train it to recognize this is a spheroid. I only want to segment objects within this spheroid, and I'm going to train it to recognize this is background. I don't care about anything outside of this area, right? And so it really is just a quick couple of coloring strokes, and then we're going to apply that into our customizable pipeline. And so we're in Airyscan Pro, where we have, again, very customizable pipelines. I'm not going to get into the weeds of that today. Big shout out to Jason Fung, who is the West Coast image analysis specialist who ran this pipeline for us. But we segmented out cells, the red cells and the green cells. We actually counter segmentation colors. So the green cells are showing here in magenta. But what I cared about for this analysis was looking at drug treatment conditions across the plate and comparing the ratio of the cells, right? We want to make these 3D cancer models, and we want to see how the treatment affects these fibroblast and cancer cell co-cultures and how the ratio either drops or increases depending on the initial plate conditions and depending on the treatment given. and the amount of treatment. So what we did here was the count of RFP, the count of GFP, and the ratio of those two. Of course, we could also, if we wanted to segment out individual cells total in the whole spheroid and normalize based on that. You can measure the whole size and diameter, right? Anything that you could think of in terms of a metric, you can measure in Airyscan with your customized pipelines. And so that's what we did here. But again, if you want to learn more about that, please reach out to us, email us at the email address that I'll show when we take a break here in a second. It is also located in the chat. But from here, we have our pipeline set up, so now we're ready to actually port this into something we call the hub. And the hub is really useful if you are generating giant data sets like this. Airyscan is actually great for all giant data sets, but the hub is great when you have this multi-well plate format and you're trying to pipe things in regularly and import them and analyze these data sets, right? We have over 300 wells that we're looking at here. And so you can see the progress as you've plugged in your image analysis pipeline into the hub, you've ported your data into the hub, and now we're applying that pipeline that we just previewed over here. And you can see how it's analyzing each well. It's analyzing more than one at a time, right? We've got some parallel processing going on here. The really nice thing, you can also see how long it's taking each image to get analyzed. So as we're looking through, you can click through, see ones that are already finished. You can check if you're happy and satisfied with that process, if you're initially setting something up, or maybe you get some data out and you want to go gut check later, like did my settings work as expected, you can always go and double check that it's all in here. So we can click through and see individual GFP or RFP segmentations within the whole organoid or spheroid here. We can also slide through in Z and see which portions were segmented in red or in green, and then you can also lay that over on the raw data. Again, if you need any gut checks, it's all there for you, right? It's not a black box. And again, we're processing a lot of wells at the same time here, so we can also see how long it's taking. It's taking like 25 seconds, I think, for each of these images, and you're gonna get tired of me saying this, but just again, we screened this plate in like 45 minutes to get the data into here, and now we're very quickly spitting out this data, and none of this has been compromised as 2D data. We're getting the entire organoid imaged in a single snap and not losing track of any of that information. So if you're worried that your samples are not fully homogeneous, which they likely aren't if they're representative, you're not going to miss out on any data, and you can rely on it being as accurate as possible in all 3 dimensions. Okay, so with that, that is the whole guided acquisition workflow using Lightfield 4D specifically. Of course, if you have any ZEISS instrument, you can configure that in multiple different ways. Maybe even if you just had a wide field, you can go in, maybe you screen and then you go back in and you want to run apotome, or just generally go back to a higher mag objective, or you need to image specific areas on a slide. There's a lot of different ways you can use this style of workflow. This is one that focuses on how you could use it to rapidly screen organoids in 3D. So I hope you learned something about that today, just to give you guys that heat map result that we all maybe want to look at, right? This is the result from the hub. You can see here we have, looks like a higher ratio of RFP to GFP cells on the left side of the plate than the right. And just so you know, we did have this plate that we received from Inspiro did have basically different treatment conditions from left to right, and we can see maybe it looks like the ratio is dropping of cancer cells to fibroblasts as we change our treatment condition. I don't know what the treatment was in this case, but you get the idea. And then of course, heat maps are lovely for showing general trends, trying to get an idea of what's going on, but that data is all sitting there. You can export that as you need into whatever statistical software you're pulling your info from. So that is the general idea. I hope you guys are excited as I am about how fast we can screen these things now and how quickly we can do these workflows without having to make any sort of compromises in terms of what we're imaging and how much data we're gathering in 3D, and how quick and easy it is to screen something like a 384 well plate as we're moving into more complex model systems in organoids and things. So with that, if you have any questions, again, feel free to contact us at the email address here. And if you want to learn more about the actual technical aspects behind the Lightfield itself, stay tuned at, I believe, 12:30 12:45. Sorry. I will be doing a lightning talk again on how the actual light field itself works, and you can learn a little bit more about that. Thanks so much for your attention. Hi, my name is Rebecca Duffy, and I'm a specialist here on our Digital Customer Engagement Center team located out of the ZMCC in Dublin, California. And I'm really excited to talk to you all today about ZEISS's new Lightfield 4D technology and give you a lightning talk on what that entails. This image of the sea urchin tumbling in the background in real time is really an example of how Lightfield 4D is such an advancement in live cell imaging. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about how that actually works. And so we've always known that life happens in 3D. And as cell culture methods and imaging techniques develop, our ability to capture these moments has only become more profound and more necessary to capture these 3D processes for live cell or even fixed imaging techniques. Traditional optical sectioning techniques have included things like point scanning on things like confocals using a pinhole to get rid of out-of-focus light. And you can even line scan on confocal as well. But of course, these are slower techniques than, say, something like a light sheet, where we are imaging one sheet or one plane at a time. In contrast, the Lightfield 4D micro lens array allows us to capture an entire volume of an image in a single snap. And of course, what this does is it makes it really, really fast. And what we can see here is an example of a zebrafish beating heart. And so now we're not talking about frames per second, we're talking about volumes per second. And again, this Lightfield 4D allows us to capture something like a fast process like the zebrafish heartbeat, which is acquired in this example at 80 volumes per second. Acquiring this type of image in the past had actually required acquiring multiple Z stacks at a time and reconstituting all of those images in post-processing when you're analyzing the data. But here we don't have to do all of that reconstruction anymore. We can just capture everything, look at it in Airyscan Pro, and track these individual cells in 4D. Again, previously the only way to do this type of imaging was to reconstruct and realign multiple volumes that have been captured over time, which of course is not reality. And now Lightfield 4D really enables us to actually see live in real time what's going on in a beating zebrafish embryo heart. Okay. So this high-speed volume acquisition is not only useful for following fast or long-term developmental processes, it is also high throughput. All right, when we can go fast, that means that we can capture data from many thicker samples in 3D using Lightfield 4D. So for things like spheroids and organoids, this really cuts down on the imaging time that it would take you to image something like a 𝗦ci𝗰𝗶𝗹𝘀 well or 384 well plate, or really just cuts down on the amount of time it takes you to image one sample. But again, as we're thinking about screening these things in these higher image formats for things like drug screening, you can imagine how much faster it is to get to the image analysis now that you can snap and capture this entire volume immediately. And I'm actually going to have a separate talk about screening a 384 well plate of spheroids later during this workshop. And finally, because we're capturing an entire volume with a single light exposure, it is gentle. Gentle imaging over really long periods of time is important to ensure that living processes that we're looking at aren't influenced by phototoxic effects. In this example, we're following developmental processes during zebrafish ear development over the course of 16 hours. Here we're snapping a volume every 2 minutes. And this is really a great leap forward compared with some of the conventional imaging methods that these scientists studying this have used prior. Traditionally, they've been acquiring volumetric Z stacks at 5 minutes every acquisition. And during that full 5-minute acquisition, there's deviations during the development processes that you're able to see, because during that volume acquisition, relative to the actual dynamics that are happening, you're capturing that in real time. So you're missing out on some information as well as not getting the full snap instantaneously. But with Lightfield, of course, we can now snap this instantaneously, so you can actually look at multiple animals and at multiple time points and still have a higher frequency that you're imaging at compared to previous techniques. So how does all of this work? That is really what we're going to talk about today. Combined with our new Voluma wide field light source, which is an LED light source, we were able to excite fluorescent samples, send that resulting signal through a microlens array, and that is placed conjugate to the back aperture just before it reaches the camera. And so we're able to snap all those images at once and transform that information into a 3D snap. Okay, so that is positioned in the beam path conjugate to the back aperture. And so that's what creates multiple images of the same sample. So we're actually capturing 37 different perspectives in the same sample, or what we call parallax views. Okay, and so you can see these 37 different parallax views here from the 37 individual lens elements, and each of these views provides both spatial and angular or directional information. And then, of course, deconvolution-based processing considers each of these views to generate a volume that is transformed into a familiar Z-stack. That resulting Z-stack can be used and analyzed as you would any other microscopy Z-stack. So here we're going to talk about how the 37 views collected by the camera chip captures 3D and hence volume information. So we're starting with the graphic on the left. We can see a sample within the Z range that can be reconstructed. And to the right, we're going to look at a cross-section of the multi-lens array lenses. So here we see a line of the 37 lenses, and we've called them 1, 4, and 7. Those are going to be the examples we're looking at. Let's have a look at a specific structure within the sample, depicted here in cyan. On the camera, this structure will be at the same position because it's in the focal plane of the objective lens and in the middle of the Z-stack. Now, if we add another structure in the same plane here, in yellow, we see that it behaves normally. As these structures are not in the same spot, they will be depicted with the displacement we would expect in a wide field image. Okay, so nothing new so far. But now let's say we have a structure at a different Z position, not just a different X position. Here in magenta, this information will be shifted in microlens 1 and microlens 7. Because it is just below the cyan structure, these two signals add up and are at the same chip position. The mix from the magenta and cyan shown in white here. Because of the displacement of the different views, the Z position can then be determined. And that's a quick snapshot of how that microlens array works. The volume acquired depends on the objective used. So on a 10x objective, you can acquire approximately 3 by 3 millimeters in a single snapshot. And of course, with increasing magnifications, the volume acquired is reduced, but the resolution improves up to a maximum resolution of 2.2 microns in X and Y and 2.8 microns in Z. So that's more than sufficient for cellular resolution on your larger dynamic 3D samples. And of course, starting to work with a new imaging technology might seem intimidating, but there really is no learning curve to Lightfield 4D. We've integrated it into the LSM 910 and the 990, and both of those are workhorses of either individual labs or imaging facilities. And we've ensured that we have things like smart software tools like Smart Setup or Copilot. You can very easily see the volume definition, which we have this really nice infometric from magenta to white to orange, showing you if you are in the top, middle, or bottom of your sample. And of course, the processing that I mentioned earlier, you can process 100 volumes within a minute, but you can also preview your processing and what it looks like by using the sliders in the software to make sure that you are capturing the information that is representative and you're not over-processing your images as well. So it is very easy to use. You just click a couple of buttons and you are imaging your 3D samples very quickly. So the LSM 910 and 990 systems provide really flexible imaging options that allow you to now pick the right tool for the job. Lightfield is the new addition to the platforms, which already offer Airyscan for sensitive super resolution or measuring molecular dynamics, and confocal imaging designed to handle multiplex fluorescence panels. So now Lightfield 4D is an additional tool you can add to your tool belt to further extend the flexibility and Swiss Army knife-like properties of your LSM systems. And of course, it can be added to Zen just like any other track, with streamlined options that focus on the hardware that really matters to you. So for example, if you want to peek behind the veil, you can see the raw data collected as well, because the camera sees the volume and our eyes don't yet. So you can actually go through and look at the sample here. We're going to look at different structures. You can look at all the different structures on the array. You can see which lens we're looking at is highlighted in yellow. And of course, you can actually look at the different layers here. As I mentioned earlier, there's color coding so that you can see the magenta in the bottom, white is the middle, and orange is the top. And of course, you can also preview your processing, as I mentioned earlier. So I want to show you just one quick example. Here we're looking at the neuronal activity in a zebrafish brain that was captured with 10 volumes per second using Lightfield. And here we're following the intensity changes of GCAM. So the gray spheres here highlight neurons that fire simultaneously at very different locations and Z positions throughout the brain. capturing these synchronous events wouldn't be possible in the sequential acquisition of a Z-stack. You would only be able to take a plane at a time. And then after the neuronal activity was recorded, a Z-stack with Airyscan Multiplex was acquired to look at a super resolution Z-stack of the neuronal structure. So we were able to combine here the physiological fast activities in GCamp and then structural measurements in higher resolution with the Airyscan detector, all in a single instrument. So we don't have to move the sample, it's stable environmentally, and we're able to capture a lot of different data on one singular system. And just finally, for further analysis, you can always use end-to-end pipelines developed in Airys. And so the ZEISS Airys Pro software is your modular imaging analysis software. So anything that you're doing from multi-channel 2D, 3D, or 4D images of virtually unlimited size, it's very good at managing huge data sets. And with ZEISS Airys Pro, which was formerly Vision 4D, it's easy to create automated end-to-end pipelines with just a few clicks. So you can use predefined pipelines for common use cases or create your own pipelines using really flexible click-and-play interfaces. But for anything from developmental biology and looking at cell tracking and morphological tracking over time, there's very specific neuroscience pipelines. There's high content screening, which you'll get a snapshot of during the Organoid 𝗶𝗳𝗃𝗃 talk that I'll give later. And of course, cell biology, anything that you need in the life science space, Airys is going to have a solution for you, whether it is built-in modules that we have, machine learning, or a customized modular click and play. Okay? And that's really going to help you actually make data out of these amazing images you're going to get on the Lightfield 4D. That is our lightning talk for Lightfield 4D. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot us an email. Thanks so much. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about how the Lightfield 4D actually works. We will take a quick break before we come back for our final talk of the workshop, learning a little bit more about Axioscan multiplexing applications. So sit tight and we'll be back at 1.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed Rebecca's talk. We're going to be switching gears a little bit and now talking about the Axioscan and multiplex applications. My name is Sebastian. I am the specialist at ZEISS for our automated systems. I've been in this role for about 5 years, and I work with the Axioscan almost on a daily basis. So I'm excited to now talk to you guys about the Axioscan 7 and its application for multiplex imaging.
Hello and welcome to today's session on unlocking the power of multiplex imaging with the ZEISS Axioscan 7. This is part of our virtual workshop hosted at the ZEISS Microscopy Customer Center in California. In this talk, we're going to learn about the options for multiplex imaging with the Axioscan 7. So let's go ahead and get started. And what I'd like to start with is just a brief introduction of what the Axioscan is. The Axioscan 7 is our automated whole slide imager. As you can see, it's a boxed system. Everything inside is fully automated and controlled by the software. This makes it very simple, automated, and easy to operate. It has full walk-away capability, meaning once you start your scan, you can leave the microscope scanning your slides by itself. It is capable of imaging in both bright field and fluorescence, and we have a number of automated features that will help you acquire more data faster. We'll learn today also about its compatibility with different multiplex reagent kits. And we'll also review some of the ready-to-use image analysis options that are available with the Axioscan. Now, regarding the flexibility for imaging different multiplex kits, one of the most important things when it comes to imaging multiplex applications is choosing the appropriate illumination source. And we do have two different options for that with the Axioscan. We have the 𝗶𝗀7, which is a ZEISS excitation source that is capable of imaging with up to 7 different excitation wavelengths. It has a really nice feature where it has a built-in feedback loop where every time that the system initializes, the 𝗶𝗀7 can detect its output and make sure that it's maintaining 100% of its output compared to the day that it was installed. That's what you can see here in green in the line here. This essentially means that this light source does not get dimmer over time compared to other light sources, which gives you reproducibility in this, the excitation for your fluorescence imaging. Now, we do also offer the 𝗦ci𝗰𝗶𝗹𝘀 as a white LED light source that can also accommodate different dyes and give you the flexibility to image a wider range of fluorophores. Now, in terms of detection, we also do have flexible options for either single band or multi-band filters that can adapt to your multiplex needs. And like I mentioned, these are compatible with a lot of different multiplex imaging kits that are available, either kits that are already packaged and made by third-party vendors, such as the Opal kits, the Roche Discovery kit, or the UltiView panels. But we can also accommodate home-developed kits that could be based out of standard Alexa fluor dyes or many other standard dyes. Now, for imaging, we do have several nice features that make the workflow very simple. So, for example, just with a single click, you can get a preview of your sample, and the system can do automatic sample detection based on this preview, as you can see here with this DAPI preview that enables automatic sample detection without any user input. This saves you time if you have a lot of tissue sections within your slide, and as we know, fluorescent samples could be hard to see. We can just have the microscope detect those for us. Now, for actual imaging, we also have a couple of nice features that can give you more data out of every slide. So, for example, we have this new contrast technique, tie contrast, or transfer of intensity equation. And essentially, this is a label-free contrast technique that can give us more context for every slide, even when there's no fluorophores present. So in this example, we can see on the left side a GFP reporting dye that shows really nicely. But in areas where there's no signal, then we lose context and we're not sure if maybe there's no tissue there, maybe it broke, or if there's just no sample or no expression present. Once we add tide to that scan, which we could scan on top of the fluorescence, we can see that we now see the morphology of the sample very clearly. And we see that there are some regions that there's just no sample, the sample may be broke, but there's also regions where we do have a sample and there's just no expression. And that's very valuable data when it comes to multiplex imaging as well. All right, so now let's take a look at a few different examples of multiplex panels that can be imaged with the Axioscan 7. Here we have this 5-color panel. We have a 4-plex plus 𝗶, and this is a TMA array where we can see that we have all of these cores imaged really nicely. And here we have an insert here showing in higher detail one of these cores. Here we're imaging all the way up to the size 7 range or the 750 range. We've also now developed a partnership with Ultiview where we can image their panel really nicely. This is also a 5-channel panel, essentially 𝗶 plus 4. And here we have a core here imaged, a TMA core image with this dyes. And we can see their expression, really nice separation here. We don't see any crosstalk or bleed through. And we can image all of these really nicely. This is another example here from the Ultiview multiplex kit. Again, the same similar panel, and we can see again also the nice imaging and separation in these channels. These are ready to use pre-optimized and validated assays. So you take the advantage of being able to use assays that are already pre-developed for you, so you don't have to do that optimization yourself. We can also support, like I mentioned, many different kits. So if you do want to push the boundary beyond 5 colors, we can image here in this example the Opal 7-color kit, and we here have an example of an image with that setup. For this, we've actually developed our own filter set 122, that has been developed to optimize the separation of these 7 channels. And in this case, we are using the 𝗦ci𝗰𝗶𝗹𝘀 for illumination, as it provides a broader range of wavelengths to illuminate these 7 colors. Now, let's take a break here from the presentation, and actually let's see how this imaging works in action. Okay, so now we are in Zen. This is the software that handles the Axioscan. And let's go ahead and take a look at how we scan our slides on this system. So I'm just going to select this one slide to scan with our 5-channel assay. And I'm simply going to click here to start a preview scan. So what this is going to do is it is going to grab the tray with these slides from the magazine. And actually, something interesting here, the Axioscan uses this tray loading mechanism where the system doesn't actually grab the glass itself. It just grabs the metal trays that hold your slides, and that adds a layer of protection to your slides themselves. So it is grabbing that tray from the magazine and bringing it to the scanning stage. In the scanning stage, it is going to acquire a pre-scan of your slide. Like I showed during the presentation, this could be done with 𝗶 as our counterstain, and that could be used for automatic sample detection. Or we can also use an enhanced bright field technique that works even if you don't have a counterstain. So this can be very useful as it gives you some flexibility in how you want to configure your panels. And if you are not using 𝗶, for example, we can always use this enhanced bright field technique to also perform automatic sample detection. So the system is acquiring the pre-scan right now. We are seeing that live in action. And then once that is done, we'll be able to review the sample detection. Perfect. So we have here our label for that slide that we can review if we want to. And then we also have here our automatic sample detection. And we can see here that it detected these 2 pieces really nicely. Let's take a closer look at what the sample detection looks like, just so you get the opportunity to visualize what that enhanced bright fields method looks like. We see very easily these samples, again, with no colorimetric contrast, and I don't need to edit here the sample detection. So all I'm going to do here is click on Start Scan, and now the system is going to proceed with scanning this slide. Okay, so maybe while this slide scans, it'll probably take a couple of minutes. I'll take this opportunity to show you a little bit of some data that we've already acquired. So here we have the 5-channel UltiView image that I showed briefly in the presentation. So maybe I'll just zoom in to a couple of different regions of interest to show you a little bit more closely what this looks like a little bit further up close. As we can see here, we have these 4 channels. And something that is also really nice is we can also view gallery mode, where we can now look at all of the channels separately and also the merged image. So this is really nicely if we want to take a closer look at particular regions and be able to visualize a bit better the different channels separately and also together here in the merge view. We can actually also create quick images from this view if we wanted to. So if you want to like just export this easily into a PowerPoint presentation or something like that, we can do that very easily. Okay, so this is one of these slides that we have here ready to show. I'll also show you here briefly this second slide that I showed in the presentation. This is also, again, a 5-channel setup from UltiView. And again, I'll just zoom into a few different regions here to show you a little bit of what this looks like. And once again, we can use the gallery view to take a look here at the channel separation. Because as you can see here, works really nicely. We're not seeing any crosstalk or bleed through here in between neighboring channels, which is really nice. Okay, great. So let's go back here to our magazine tab, and we see here the scan is progressing really nicely. We're more than halfway done with the scan. And again, here we have the time that has elapsed so far and the estimated remaining time, which is always an estimate. You can see it's actually going a little bit faster than estimated. So this should be done very shortly. Okay, great. So now this is done scanning, and let's take a look at what this scan looks like. Okay, so let's take a look at this scan. And I'm just going to zoom in into a few different regions to show you here what that looks like. We see really nice detail here in all of these markers. And again, here we have a 5-channel assay. Also, if we don't want to go into the gallery, even right from here, we can also maybe hide some channels. That way we can sort of focus on the channels that we want to take a look at more closely at a given time. We also have the option of hiding 𝗫𝗫 here, which can help obviously make this a little bit easier to see sometimes. So just to give you here an idea of how that imaging looks like, everything looks really nice. This is what I usually expect to see from a sample like this one. Okay, great. So now let's look at other options here for the Axioscan. I'm going to return to the presentation. And okay, so now I want to share a little bit about our recent development here with a new version of the Axioscan called the Axioscan 7 for Spatial Biology. And this is a more streamlined workflow that can help us acquire more data faster. And here we're actually offering a full end-to-end solution where we can make recommendations on the appropriate reagents to use. Of course, we provide all of the imaging and the software, and we can also provide analysis platforms for particular panel combinations. So let's take a look at how this works. We're gonna start here by reviewing first the options for reagents. So we've partnered with UltiView and with क्रomnigon, 2 different companies that provide kits for multiplex imaging. Here we already showed in the presentation a few of the 5 channel options for the UltiView dyes. Again, these are ready to use, pre-optimized and validated immuno-oncology assays. And we'll also review in a little bit some of the options from क्रomnigon, which actually enables us to image even up to 8 channels. So we'll see what those looks like as well. Now, in terms of the imaging, the new Axioscan 7 for spatial biology does have a few different advantages compared to the previous Axioscan 7 version. One is it already comes with an AI in its segmentation routine for hard to detect samples. This is already pre-trained, so it comes available to use from the get-go with the Axioscan. We now also support our new ZEISS Axiocam 820, which has a larger field of view and it's more sensitive than our previous offering. This enables us faster imaging for fluorescence. And it now also supports a new HDR mode, which allows us to image higher dynamic ranges without overexposing our samples. So previously we had to sort of make sure that we set our exposures right for every sample so that we could, get appropriate signal without overexposure. And here the new HDR mode actually allows us to use pretty much the same setting for a wide range of samples and not have that issue of overexposure here, which is really nice. We also introduced a new protocol to normalize fluorescence intensity, not only between one system, but also between different systems in the same location and different systems across locations. So we could have an Axioscan for spatial bio here in California, we could have one in Europe, and they can all be normalized to the same fluorescence intensity in terms of the excitation, so we can get comparable results across multiple sites. Like I mentioned, we now also support up to 8 channels with the Chromnigon step click technology, and we have developed a filter set in partnership with Chromnigon to ensure that we get optimal separation from those 8 dyes. And if you want to push things further beyond 8 channels, we now also offer cyclical staining support with a co-registration model that will allow you to co-register multiple rounds of imaging and staining. Now, this is an example here of one of these 8-plex or 8-channel assays, and I'm just going to show you here a little bit of a closer detail of what that looks like. Obviously, we have now a lot of data here. This can start become really busy, but I'll show you some options in which we can simplify the view of this, and also how we can use AI for analysis of these complex samples. Now, like I mentioned, this is also a more streamlined workflow with the Axioscan 7 Spatial Bio. And one of the really nice features about this is that it actually is full hands-off automation, where the workflow can be determined by the slide itself. So we could have in the label for the slide a barcode or even some optical characters, some words in there that can actually determine the assay for that particular slide, so that the user doesn't have to select the assay. The slide itself already contains the assay, and our new, more simplified software can detect what that assay is and run the workflow automatically. This new platform also supports integration into LIMS systems and AI-powered image analysis platforms. So let's take a look at what those analysis options look like. And for this, we have also partnered with a different company here called MindPeak. And MindPeak is a leader already in AI-based analysis for these kinds of applications. And we can see how they definitely have a wide variety of algorithms already registered and supported and pre-validated. And let's take a look at how these new algorithms work now within our partnership with ZEISS. So this is an example here of what MindPeak the view looks like. We just have here a TMA array with a few different dyes, and essentially the analysis is already done. And again, it is AI powered. And I'm just going to zoom in into one of these TMA cores to show you essentially some of the results, where we can segment not only just the cells by their marker as it was imaged, but they also support now a phenotype analysis. So we can also take a look at the different cells and not just the markers, right? So this is really nice if we can take a look at what the distribution of the cells are, and not just think about markers, but also think about phenotypes. All right, So let's also take a look at how this new simplified workflow looks like with the Axioscan 7 Spatial Bio. So now we are looking at our slide stream interface. This is a very simple interface here to scan our slides. And here I'm just going to select again one of these slides. And all I'm going to do is click here to run workflow. So I don't have to select the workflow myself. Like I mentioned, the workflow here is determined by the slide itself. So this workflow will do a few number of things. It will preview the slide, which will provide us a quick insight into what that slide looks like and the automatic sample detection. And also, like you see here, based on the label, it also knows what assay it contains. So this is an example of our 𝗠 7-plex assay, and it already knows the markers that are in that assay. So it can actually set the scanning parameters to those markers specifically. And it will now proceed with the sample detection and the scan of this sample. Okay, so while this sample scans, again, all of this is just happening in the background, so there's not much to see here. I will show you here an example of how that sample looks like once it is scanned and analyzed in MindPeak. And by the way, this is an automatic transfer where you upload automatically into MindPeak so that the analysis can get started. So again, with just one click, we're able to go through this entire workflow very easily. And I'll just show you here that sample that was that is just imaging, and we see here the results of the scan. And again, we can either visualize here the markers as they are, or the analysis is actually already done. So what we can do here to visualize the analysis is we just have to draw an ROI in the region that we want to see the results. So I'll just draw here a fairly large ROI around this area, just to take a look at what the segmentation looks like here. And now I can take a look here at the segmentation, and I can again take a look here at the markers that are present in that area. I'll just zoom in here to show you a few different regions. Again, we do have a lot of markers, so sometimes it's easier to just hide a few of these so we can focus on a few at a time. But we do get here a count of all of the markers in that area, which is pretty nice. We can download this as our report already if that is our goal. And as I mentioned before, we can also take a look at the phenotypes that are present here for this sample. Okay, so let's go back quickly here to our presentation. And here I just wanted to end with a brief comparison of the two flavors of the Axioscan, so you have a little bit of a clear idea of what they are and how they can power your multiplex imaging in a slightly different way. So again, the Axioscan 7 is our more flexible configuration. This one can have your choice of either the Voluma 7 or the 𝗦ci𝗰𝗶𝗹𝘀 for excitation. So it can accommodate a lot of different multiplex kits. You can actually also support circular polarized light imaging, and we can choose from a wide range of objectives. We can have up to 7 objectives in this configuration. Again, we have a flexible choice of filters that can fit your preferred multiplex kit, and we will help you make that choice. So if you're not sure, we're happy to always make a recommendation and help you with that configuration. And this version is actually also upgradable to add some of the spatial bio features that we've mentioned. Now, the Axioscan 7 Spatial Biology, this is the one that now has our new camera, the Axiocam H20, which can provide the HDR imaging. It also supports higher reproducibility across systems thanks to that fluorescence intensity normalization. It comes with some pre-trained AI models for automatic sample detection. It has just one option for the filter set, and that is the one that can accommodate up to 8 channels. With the 𝗠 kit, it can also support the UltiView kit and many other kits. We're also happy to show you here the options for the fluorophores that are compatible with this filter set. And it also comes again with that integrated co-registration module if you want to look into cyclic imaging assays. Okay, and with that, I would just like to thank you for attending this session. If you do have any questions or want to learn more about the...
Welcome back. So this concludes our virtual workshop. I hope you enjoyed that presentation from Sebastian on the technique or application of multiplex staining, imaging, and analysis. I'd like to take a moment to just thank all of you, the community, the microscope community. We mean it when we say that your success is our success. Of course, I'd also like to thank everyone involved that contributed to this effort, from registration to production to content contribution. So thank you, everyone, and we're going to wish you a wonderful week ahead, and we hope that you learned something here. This was as educational for you as it was for us, and have a great day.